If you say I'm from Dalton, we go to the IML and they will see your Dalton on the name tag and they say, oh God, I'm gonna just pray for y'all. I'm gonna keep praying for y'all. Because this is a black town, 80-90% black. We've been the poster child for black ignorance, black arrogance, black dysfunction. Now we want to be the poster child for black love, black excellence, black unity.
Well said, Trustee Ed Steves, or more accurately, Trustee Itty, who's running for re-election. It's clear that this election could be a turning point for Dalton, and I hope it leads to some much-needed changes. Let's dive into the latest board meeting and see what happened today. As usual, Tiffany Henyard has managed to bring drama to the table. The meeting started with the Pledge of Allegiance, and as always, there was a typical citizens' address, time where residents get the opportunity to share their concerns. However, true to form, Tiffany was late. Despite a quorum being present, the meeting was delayed because the microphones weren't working. Trustee K. Belair tried to turn them on, but William Moore, a known supporter of Tiffany, promptly shut them off, claiming that the microphones would stay off until Tiffany arrived. This disregard for the residents' concerns seemed to reflect blind loyalty to Tiffany, rather than the interests of the community. It's frustrating for everyone when public officials show such disregard for citizens' voices. The irony of it all is that Tiffany, despite being late, often demands respect from others, calling for the rules to be followed. Yet, she herself doesn't follow them, and residents are starting to take notice. Trustees are growing more frustrated with her tardiness and lack of accountability. While the town faces real issues, Tiffany appears more focused on asserting control and ensuring her microphone is always working perfectly. The imbalance of power in the meetings is glaring, and the lack of genuine leadership is becoming impossible to ignore. It's clear that the community is increasingly dissatisfied with Tiffany's behavior. Leadership is about listening to the people, not just enforcing rules when it suits you. It's time for some serious changes in Dalton.
These board and the precious residents, we're not forced to do this. I love my job. I love working for Mayor Henyard. I'm here at 7:30 in the morning, whatever it takes, because this is what we inherited. I appreciate your energy and your effort to get these things done. And I'll end with this. It said, any that's chief among you, let it be he that serves. We see your heart, that you love for these people. And so we're with you. And with that, I'm going to give my report. So I appreciate it.
At this point, Tiffany Henyard begins to display her usual antics, intentionally agitating those around her and trying to provoke reactions. Her behavior, often designed to get under people's skin, seems to escalate every time she arrives late to a meeting, despite being the one who's tardy. Tiffany decides that the residents who have already gone to the metal detectors to enter the building should go through the process again, because she claims she doesn't feel comfortable. This demand, right after her late arrival, raises serious questions about whether this is simply a reflection of her general disregard for others, or if it's a calculated move to assert control over the situation and show her power. Tiffany's need to exert authority in this way, by inconveniencing residents and making them repeat a process they've already completed, seems to be part of a larger pattern of behavior that shows her utter disregard for the comfort and respect of the people she's supposed to serve. It's hard not to wonder if her late arrival and the subsequent imposition of this additional inconvenience are deliberate tactics meant to provoke frustration and tension. After all, starting the meeting by alienating the very people she's supposed to represent is hardly a strategy that builds trust or earns support. Instead, it only highlights her inconsiderate and authoritarian approach to leadership, rather than showing leadership by arriving on time and setting a respectful tone. Tiffany creates a situation where the community is once again put at a disadvantage, simply because she decided to treat their time and comfort as secondary to her own. A leader in a position like hers should prioritize the well-being and ease of the community. But Tiffany's actions appear to do the opposite. She manipulates circumstances to fit her own needs, demonstrating little regard for the residents' time or the resources they've already invested in getting to the meeting. The decision to force residents to go through the metal detectors again is a prime example of how Tiffany uses petty, arbitrary actions to assert herself in situations where cooperation and mutual respect will be far more effective. It serves no purpose other than to fuel unnecessary conflict. Instead of fostering an environment of trust and mutual respect, she exacerbates tensions, further alienating the community. This type of behavior only deepens the divide between Tiffany and the residents, showing that her primary concern isn't the well-being of the people, but maintaining control and asserting power. As the meeting progresses, it becomes increasingly clear that Tiffany's leadership style is alienating, self-serving, and ultimately counterproductive. She's shown time and time again that she's more interested in making a statement than in actually being a representative of the people. Demanding that residents repeat a process they've already gone through only serves to fuel tensions and distract from the issues at hand. It's an unproductive move that only makes the community's growing frustrations even more palpable. And as this pattern continues, the residents deserve far better than the treatment they're receiving later in the meeting. Tiffany apologized for people acting out of order, which felt incredibly tone-deaf considering her own behavior. She began setting the rules for the meeting, stating that everyone needed to remain in order, not yell, and refrain from saying anything inappropriate. While everyone is entitled to their opinion, she somehow failed to notice that her own actions were what set the tone for the chaos that followed. Her tone was dismissive, and her insistence on following the rules seemed hypocritical given her own disregard for those same rules. The trust she's losing from residents is becoming more evident with each passing moment. It's also worth noting the increasing involvement of Chief Lacey, who seems to be aligning more and more with Tiffany's personal agenda rather than serving the interests of the community. It's difficult not to wonder why Lacey's actions seem to be aimed at supporting Tiffany, even when it's clear that these actions are escalating the situation unnecessarily. Why is she patrolling and carrying out the mayor's orders, especially when things seem to be spiraling out of control? The more involved she becomes, the more it seems like her focus is on protecting Tiffany's power rather than addressing real community concerns. The situation is only getting more tense with the ongoing accusations surrounding trustee Andrew Holmes. Holmes, once aligned with Tiffany, now finds himself under scrutiny, with many accusing him of exploiting people who were previously on Tiffany's side. These accusations are intensifying the already heated environment, and Holmes is caught in the middle of a controversy that shows no signs of slowing down. His absence from the most recent board meeting is telling. Instead of facing the growing pressure and scrutiny, he chose to stay out of the spotlight, hoping to avoid further damage. It's easy to understand why someone in his position would take that route. Given the level of tension and finger-pointing, what's telling about Holmes' situation is that his past alliances with Tiffany are now being used against him. Despite his previous connections with the mayor, it seems like those alliances are now being twisted into accusations of exploitation. Whether these allegations have merit or not, the ongoing resentment towards him only fuels a fire that's been building for months. It feels as if the situation is being deliberately stoked, with people in positions of authority leveraging their power to keep the drama alive and distract from the real issues at hand. But while Tiffany's antics, Andrew Holmes' controversies, and Chief Lacey's involvement dominate the conversation, the community's pressing concerns remain unresolved. It's almost as if the political maneuvering, personal vendettas, and power struggles are meant to keep the public distracted, while the real work of governance is ignored. The focus is on the drama, not the issues that actually affect the residents of Dalton. This constant cycle of distractions only adds to the confusion and frustration that residents are feeling. And then there's the matter of Chief Lacey's role. If her actions are simply a reflection of her loyalty to Tiffany, it undermines the trust that the community has in their leadership. Chief Lacey should be focusing on protecting the safety and well-being of the residents, not enforcing the mayor's personal agenda. But as the situation continues to escalate, it seems that her priorities are becoming more aligned with Tiffany's personal objectives and less about serving the community. As much as the drama may seem compelling, it's clear that it's not helping the residents of Dalton in any meaningful way. The political power plays, petty arguments, and personal vendettas are overshadowing the real issues like safety, infrastructure, and the economic well-being of the community. The residents deserve better than this constant game of accusations and distractions. What they need is transparency, accountability, and solutions to the challenges they face every day. But instead, they're stuck in the middle of a game that serves only the political ambitions of those in power. As the meeting progresses and Tiffany continues to assert her control, it's clear that the focus is completely misdirected. The residents need real leadership. People who will stand up for them and work toward finding solutions, not just perpetuating the drama and finger-pointing. But as Tiffany's tactics become more brazen, the divide between her and the community only deepens now. Let's move to the next clip. A motion to approve an ordinance freezing the village's credit card policy was discussed. Trustees put in place an ordinance that freezes credit card payments, which, considering the timing with election season fast approaching, seems highly strategic. Jason House, who has announced he's running for mayor, is likely aware of how this could impact his campaign. The trustees, also up for re-election, know that tightening financial controls is something the community will notice, especially with the growing skepticism around Tiffany's financial management. This new ordinance to freeze credit card payments is a stark contrast to Tiffany's past actions as a trustee, just before she was elected mayor. In the clip I'm about to show you, we'll see Tiffany, back when she was just a trustee, ordering that no more payments be made without board approval. This moment was just before her election as mayor, but she was already in a position where she had control over financial matters. Let's take a look at this flashback and see what kind of leader she was before taking office. The video shows Tiffany in action, telling the board to halt any payments or purchases without board approval, even going as far as directing the staff not to cut checks. Her reasoning? She didn't want any outgoing officials using taxpayer money without the new board's consent. The message was clear: control the finances and make sure the new leadership had a say before any more spending took place. Watching this clip again gives us insight into the leadership that Tiffany demonstrated before becoming mayor. The concerns Jason House seemed to have, judging by his expression, are becoming all too real now. Tiffany was already showing signs of wanting to hold financial reins tightly. And now, as mayor, those traits have only intensified looking back now. The contrast between Tiffany's actions then and the current freeze on credit card payments is telling. As a trustee, she froze payments to ensure that taxpayers' money wasn't misused. Now, as mayor, the trustees are taking similar actions to curb spending, which further emphasizes the financial tensions surrounding her leadership. Whether it's because of her own financial mismanagement or her desire to control the board, it's clear that financial decisions are a major part of the ongoing drama. Now that we've covered this, let's return to the most recent board meeting, where more motions are discussed. The political temperature is rising, and with Jason House's candidacy for mayor and several trustees running for re-election, it's evident that this election will have significant consequences. The residents of Dalton need leadership that is clear, honest, and transparent, not this constant cycle of distractions and political games. As the meeting unfolds and these issues continue to surface, one thing is certain: the community deserves better than the chaos they're currently facing.
And for our safety, we're going to have people go through the metal detector. You can say, hold on. You have to listen. You have to listen. You can say, you have to say no all you want. It's not up to you as relates to safety. It's about safety for everyone. So everyone will have a seat, but we are going to have everyone go through the metal detectors so that everyone is secure in the building. The last board meeting, we had an incident. You have to listen. I just told you guys, you have to listen. So you guys have to go through the metal detectors so that everyone is secure in the building. Everyone can stay here. Everyone has a seat, but we care about safety. Safety is our top priority, no matter who it is or what it is. So if you don't mind, we're going to pause while everybody goes through the metal detectors, come back to your seat, and then we just have our meeting so that everyone's safe.
At this board meeting, the topic of credit card spending changes and the sale of village property took center stage, revealing a growing tension between the trustees and Tiffany Henyard's administration. The discussion about credit card policy changes focused on restricting the use of the cards to only those items approved by the board, with a cap of $55,000 per transaction. The goal was to introduce reasonable safeguards to prevent reckless spending, while still allowing for necessary day-to-day transactions like paying certain bills. While these changes were meant to alleviate concerns about financial mismanagement, it was clear that the board had little trust in Tiffany's administration to handle the funds properly. Tiffany, however, remained composed throughout the meeting, despite accusations from the trustees that she and her team had mishandled funds recklessly. Her calm demeanor raised suspicions. Either she was completely unaware that she might eventually be held accountable, or more likely, she was confident, perhaps even arrogant enough, to believe she could get away with anything, immune to any consequences. Adding fuel to the fire, reports surfaced that Tiffany had arrived at the meeting with two new guests, whom many speculated were her defense lawyers. This raised even more questions, as it seemed she had preemptively prepared for the possibility of facing legal charges, as though anticipating fallout from her actions. Known for a cutthroat approach to politics and public matters, Tiffany's history of playing dirty only heightened skepticism about her motives as the meeting continued. Trustee Kiana grew more vocal and increasingly frustrated with Tiffany's actions and decisions. Kiana raised the issue of the sale of the Melody Fitness Center property, a facility that had been in use for years despite significant investments, including $50,000 spent on installing a police sign. Kiana made it clear that the community was in dire financial straits and that the property needed to be sold to get it back on the tax rolls, which would benefit the town. She pointed out that for years, the board had been pushing for action on this property, which had been discussed multiple times. There had even been a proposal to turn part of the building into a police station, but despite years of planning, the building remained unoccupied and in use, and the idea of turning it into a police station had never materialized. Kiana's frustration came to a head when she directly challenged the deputy chief, questioning why, after 3 years, the building hadn't been transformed into a police station or community center as originally intended. She also highlighted the unrealistic promises made in the past, such as turning the building into a free community pool, which had clearly failed to come to fruition and had instead proven to be a financial drain. Kiana's frustration reached its peak when she bluntly called out the financial mismanagement of the past, pointing to the unrealistic expectations set by Tiffany's administration. Given the village's dire financial situation, Kiana argued that selling the property was the only realistic option left in the no-holds-barred moment. Kiana didn't mince words when addressing the state of the village's finances, describing it as a financial disaster. She emphasized that the board was already having to transfer money from the TIF, tax increment financing, district just to cover basic bills. The financial struggles were undeniable, and Kiana made it clear that Tiffany's administration couldn't escape responsibility for contributing to the mess amid the heated discussion. Kiana's exasperation boiled over into a memorable moment. She snapped, "You can go outside and we can sell you too." The comment, though intended to lighten the mood, was a telling remark that showcased just how far Tiffany's actions had pushed Kiana to the brink. The frustration and tension in the room were palpable. It was clear that Kiana had reached her breaking point. Tiffany had clearly pushed her too far, and Kiana wasn't backing down. The comment served as a symbolic reflection of just how desperate and angry Kiana had become at the ongoing mismanagement and lack of accountability as the meeting continued. It was evident that Kiana was just getting started. Her vocal criticism of Tiffany's administration signaled that things were about to get even more heated. The battle over the sale of the property was far from over. Tiffany's previously unshakable grip on the administration might have seemed like a lock, but Kiana's increasingly vocal frustration was showing that the tension between the trustees and Tiffany's leadership was reaching a boiling point. The days of blind loyalty to Tiffany were quickly fading, and the pressure to address the financial struggles and make real changes to the administration's approach was growing. The community, it seemed, was no longer willing to tolerate the lack of accountability, and the battle lines were being drawn.
There's no more purchasing or buying anything until the new board comes in. So I'm just letting you guys know, put that on hold so you don't cut checks for anybody. And if you got an issue, I think you should weigh in to the board. We'll know what the issue is, but don't cut any checks.
So, I just have one question. Do you mean you don't want any more services? You want all services to be halted until the new board? I'm a little confused as...
No, okay, I'll elaborate for sure. No, what I'm stating is I don't want anyone that's exiting to go with our dollars, the taxpayers' money, without board approval. So don't just cut checks for someone coming to you and say, cut this check, cut that check. I'm saying either A, run across the board if it's something that we need to vote on or agree on before you cut checks. Because when the new mayor enters into office May 8th, we want to make sure all our money still is there.
Okay.
Okay.
So, just I want to try to clear. Are you talking payroll or billing?
I'm stating, do not allow anyone to tell you to cut checks that should not be telling you to cut checks. That goes from the outgoing board.
The ongoing discussion at the village board meeting painted a dire picture of Dalton's financial struggles, as trustees called for the sale of any assets owned by the village in a desperate bid to alleviate the crisis. Among the key issues raised, the unutilized Melody Fitness Center property stood out as a glaring symbol of mismanagement. Despite years of discussions about transforming the building into a fully functioning police station or community center, the facility had remained empty, offering no benefits to the community. Tiffany Henyard and her administration were under fire for their inability to effectively manage or make any progress with the property. Trustee Kiana, visibly frustrated by the inaction, called for Melody Fitness Center to be sold to get it back on the tax rolls, an action that would help the village's finances in the short term. She emphasized that this sale was an urgent necessity, especially since the building had been intended for use by the community, but had failed to fulfill that purpose. Kiana's tone was sharp, expressing how deeply upset she was about the ongoing inefficiencies that had left the facility unused and, by extension, the village financially exposed. Her words highlighted the pressing need to address Dalton's immediate financial crisis, while Tiffany seemed to deflect responsibility, leaving the trustees and residents to question why there had been no meaningful progress. For years, the situation surrounding the Melody Fitness Center wasn't just about financial strain. It also raised concerns about transparency and accountability. In another pivotal moment of the meeting, Trustee Tammy Brown voiced her concerns about a $50,000 sign that had been placed at the facility. This sign, which falsely advertised the building as a police station, was a glaring symbol of reckless financial behavior. It had been erected in an attempt to legitimize the facility's status as a functioning police station, even though that vision had never come to fruition. The sign, illuminated and clearly visible, created a dangerous illusion. Residents or visitors to the building might assume it was a fully operational police station. In the event of an emergency, someone seeking help or refuge at the building could find themselves in a life-threatening situation. only to discover that the building was vacant. Tammy's frustration was palpable as she explained how this misleading sign had become a dangerous symbol of mismanagement. She highlighted the previous measures taken to obscure the sign, such as blocking access to the building to prevent further confusion about its purpose. However, despite these efforts, the sign remained, continuing to mislead the public and raise concerns about the village's leadership. The fact that $50,000 had been spent on something so clearly unnecessary and potentially harmful was a stark reminder of the reckless spending that had characterized Tiffany's administration. The issue of the Melody Fitness Center, particularly the wasted $50,000 on misleading sign, was emblematic of a much larger problem: Tiffany's poor fiscal management. It was becoming evident that her administration's spending habits were a significant contributor to the village's current financial disaster. Rather than focusing on projects that directly benefited the community, Tiffany had prioritized expensive, unproductive ventures, such as a sign, while ignoring more pressing issues. This pattern of mismanagement reflected a failure to adequately plan or secure the necessary funding before committing to projects, which only deepened the financial hole the village was in as the discussions continued. It became increasingly clear that Tiffany's administration had failed to deliver on its promises, and instead of addressing the real needs of the community, she had squandered resources on projects that did not provide tangible benefits. The Melody Fitness Center, which was meant to serve as a community resource, had become a symbol of waste and inefficiency. The facility had been partially allocated for use as a police station, yet the necessary resources for that project were never secured. In the end, the building sat vacant, and the community continued to wait for solutions that never came. Worse still, the village had spent $50,000 on a sign that was not only unnecessary but also misleading, further contributing to the lack of progress and the growing distrust within the community, while the trustees were pushing for action. Tiffany seemed more focused on defending her actions than addressing the financial realities at hand. Her behavior was increasingly scrutinized, both by the board members and by the public. It was becoming clear that the people of Dalton were fed up with empty promises and wasteful spending. Trustee Tammy Brown's point struck a nerve with many, as she pointed out that residents were being misled by the sign, which suggested that the building was a functioning police station when it was not. The community was not only dealing with financial mismanagement, but with the risks associated with misleading and careless decisions made by Tiffany and her administration. As the meeting progressed, the discussion shifted back to financial realities Dalton was facing. The village was in the midst of financial disaster, and urgent actions needed to be taken to stabilize the situation. The trustees were now looking at asset sales, such as the Melody Fitness Center, as a way to bring in much-needed revenue and cut through the bureaucratic delays that had held up action for years. The issue was no longer about which political figures were in charge, but about finding a solution to the financial crisis. At the heart of the meeting was the overwhelming realization that Tiffany's administration had failed to live up to its responsibilities. Despite the promises and grand plans, the people of Dalton had been left waiting for progress that never came. The Melody Fitness Center, once a symbol of hope and opportunity, had become a cautionary tale of poor planning, reckless spending, and missed opportunities. The board's push to sell assets and address the financial issues head-on was an urgent call for action. It was clear that the trustees had reached a breaking point, and they were no longer willing to sit idly by while Tiffany's administration continued to make misguided decisions that only worsened the situation. As discussions unfolded, it was evident that the time for empty promises had passed. The village needed real solutions, and it was clear that the road to recovery would require bold decisions and decisive leadership, something that had been lacking under Tiffany's watch in the end. The meeting underscored a need for accountability and a shift in priorities. The community's trust had been eroded, and it was clear that rebuilding that trust would require a fundamental change in how the village was managed. The financial crisis was real, and the time for action was now. Whether Tiffany would rise to the occasion or continue to deflect responsibility remained to be seen, but one thing was certain. The people of Dalton needed more than empty words and misguided priorities. They needed real leadership,